You see the endless, exhausting battles. All the time. The baby boomers get relentlessly scolded for hoarding the wealth. Millennials constantly take heat for killing traditional industries. And meanwhile, Gen Z is totally rewriting the cultural playbook. They are the dark matter of the social universe, unseen, uncelebrated, yet providing the silent gravity that holds the entire structure together. They avoid causing a scene. They reject acting offended. They aren't frantically pursuing the newest viral craze. They just operate. Meet Generation X, people born somewhere between the Kennedy assassination and the early years of Reagan. They represent the co-workers who complete the project minus the drama, the mothers and fathers who bypass the preachy monologues, the early pioneers who built the foundation of the internet without broadcasting every single detail. But here is the compelling twist. Actually, come to think of it, from a behavioral standpoint, they might be the least understood population breathing today. Generation X became the initial population to see massive independence forced onto them. It wasn't a trendy parenting philosophy, it was sheer necessity. Imagine an 8-year-old kid walking home from class completely unchaperoned, unlocking the front door to an empty house, and realizing they are entirely alone until evening. They weren't just latchkey kids. They were tiny astronauts adrift in living room voids, learning to navigate the vacuum of silence long before they knew how to chart the stars. No location beacons, no Ring doorbells, no urgent text threads. You figured things out yourself. You heated your own snacks. You tackled your homework. You persisted. Countless adolescents grew up within this incredibly specific dynamic. And though it molded them into highly resilient adults, it simultaneously planted a deep, undeniable truth. You can never guarantee that another person will arrive to help. That brutal lesson sticks forever. That solitude achieved more than just fostering self-reliance. It hardwired their minds to the weight of consequences. When guardians eventually returned, the boundaries were firm. You overstepped a line, the penalty was immediate. There were no lengthy negotiations, no deep dives into emotional processing, no elaborate justifications. Experts call this a high-stakes environment, a reality where every action triggers a direct and predictable outcome. They navigate life like a game of chess on thin ice, where a single wrong move doesn't just lose a piece, it sinks the entire board. At the same time, they watched the adults. They heard them promise security, and then they saw them fail to provide it. They witnessed family units dissolving. They watched dedicated employees get laid off after decades of service. They observed major institutions preaching one set of values while practicing another. They were told, exert effort, respect the system, and success will follow. Only to find that the solid ground they were promised was actually a tectonic plate mid-shift, sliding toward a cliff they hadn't been warned about. Consequently, Gen X didn't turn into wide-eyed dreamers. They became tactical planners. Not necessarily cynical, but definitely prepared. They learned to anticipate disruption and emotionally brace for impact. This specific mindset clarifies something people often misread as coldness. It's not coldness, it's distance. Gen X isn't antisocial, they are simply protective of their privacy. They matured in an era where errors weren't etched in digital stone. Shame eventually dissipated rather than going viral. personal experiences remained just that, personal. Therefore, broadcasting their daily existence online doesn't feel like a thrill. It feels like a vulnerability. To them, the less the world knows about you, the more secure you actually are. That is also the origin of their specific sense of humor, satire, cynicism, poking fun at themselves. This isn't a sign of apathy, it's a shield. They grew up with a constant layer of background dread, Cold War alerts, nuclear drills, adults discussing global catastrophe while simultaneously telling kids not to worry. When the world feels inherently volatile, but no one speaks about it plainly, you learn to maintain an emotional buffer, just in case. And yet, despite these defenses, Gen X cultivated one of the most quietly effective professional ethics you will ever encounter. They don't market their productivity. They don't build personal brands. They don't lecture others on hustle culture. They just execute. Their employment started in their early teens, delivering papers before dawn, working cash registers without digital assistance. They shouldered professional weight long before they reached adulthood. These weren't passion projects. They were survival exercises. They learned to forge their own blades in the fire before they ever thought about polishing the hilt. They also observed the death of corporate loyalty. They saw businesses discard people who had sacrificed years. As a result, Gen X pivoted. They stopped placing faith in systems. They started placing it in craftsmanship. They don't believe a company will protect them. They believe their own utility will. That is why so many maintain various side projects or income streams, not for status, but as a form of insurance. Here is the central paradox within the Gen X psyche. They are fiercely self-sufficient, yet remarkably dependable. They will never ask for assistance. They will solve the problem themselves. But the moment someone else is in trouble, they show up. There is no public announcement, no request for credit, no digital performance. This is because that is how bonds were forged when the adults weren't around. Their connection to authority follows the same logic. They don't give respect to titles. They respect results. If you are skilled at what you do, they are incredibly loyal. If you aren't, they disengage immediately. This stems from watching leaders fail repeatedly, politically, financially, socially. They understood early on, having power is not the same as having wisdom. Financially, Gen X took one hit after another. Many started their adult lives in recessions. Others were just establishing careers when global financial collapses erased their progress. So, they adjusted. Not through blind optimism, but through redundancy. If nothing is permanent, you stay ready for the end of the cycle. Psychologically, this degree of self-reliance carries a price. They are the world-class mechanics rebuilding an engine in a thunderstorm, who feel like a fraud for admitting they've run out of fuel. Not because they lack friends, but because needing help feels like a loss of autonomy. They were conditioned to handle things in silence. They also matured using a different method of learning. Prior to the age of instant answers, information required effort. You hunted for it. You waited. You struggled to grasp a concept. That friction made the knowledge permanent. They fixed broken objects because that's simply what you did. You didn't just replace, you repaired. That hands-on approach birthed a deep conviction. Most obstacles are manageable if you remain patient long enough. Now, they are raising children in a reality they barely recognize. Constant monitoring, permanent digital visibility, The endless documenting of every milestone. They gave their kids exactly what they missed: total attention. But occasionally, they wonder what that trade-off cost. Because they learned early on that the safest place to be in a storm is the eye of the hurricane, where the radar can't find you. Generation X doesn't claim superiority over other groups. They are simply unique. They came of age in the cracks between worlds, after the old structures broke, but before the new digital order had stabilized. You know, maybe that's the whole point. They are the load-bearing walls of a building that everyone admires for its fancy windows. Nobody cheers for the concrete holding the roof up. And that's exactly how the concrete likes it.